What secrets will you never tell your parents? Okay, so this was in the pre-cell phone era. I answered the phone and it was my aunt calling from Florida. My parents had planned a long driving trip to see her. She was calling to say that maybe now wasn't a good time to visit. It only took about 30 seconds for it to turn into a rant about not really wanting them in her house, to flat out insults about every wrong they had ever done to her. When the rant ran out, I said, they left an hour ago. My aunt said, let's just make this our little secret, okay? And hung up. I stole this tape. They bought that taught couples some new techniques to spice up their naughty life. They were demonstrated by two real people, so it was corn. I let a friend hold it, and he lost it. I'm sure they know, but I'll never admit it. I had skipped school, and the school called my dad to ask why I didn't show up. So he calls me and says, why the hell aren't you at school? So I told him that I'm actually on a field trip, and they should know that. And he says, okay, let me talk to your teacher. So I was in downtown, and there was no shortage of homeless people. So if I ask one if he'll pretend to be my teacher for $5. He sold it perfectly, and my dad apologized to me. Oh, that's terrible. When I was 14, I left the house at 1 in the morning to hang out with friends in an empty field and watch a meteor shower, which I had ironically been grounded from seeing with my family due to sneaking out to hang out in the woods. I went out my window, difficult and needed help from my friends due to being a twig, and then came in through the back door at 3. I left it unlocked. Nearly got caught, but I told my dad I had simply been taking the dog out, which he believed since I've done that before. I never snuck out again, though, due to the scare nearly being caught gave me. Well, I was going to hide the fact that I got robbed at gunpoint, but my sister's mouth is too flabby. I was in fact a dangerous area when traveling and survived a night of bombing. When I was a kid, we were on my dad's boat, far out at sea. He asked me to take the wheel. After about 5 minutes, I saw a big log floating, and I steered into it and hit it with the prop hard. I had seen a cartoon where they did this, and it just turned the log into toothpicks. Well, as you can probably guess, it didn't do that. We had to get towed in by the Coast Guard. My super religious father has no idea how drunk I got in high school. I think my mom knew, but she definitely never told my dad, most likely to save me from the hell he'd put me through. I got so drunk and stoned one night I let a raccoon in the house, because I thought it was my dog's. I got the raccoon out, but the raccoon ripped up the couch. I just flipped the couch pillows over, and it's been a year. They still haven't found out. I lied when I said they repaid me for half of my sister's wedding dinner. My dad was somewhat forced into early retirement, and while splitting the dinner bill wouldn't change things overall, I did not want him stretching his retirement money to cover something that I could afford to pay in full. When I was a junior in high school, I bought my dog at a flea market for $20, rubbed some dirt on her, and brought her home. I told my parents she was a stray I found at a friend's house. They still have no idea. That closet I got with the lock is not to protect my valuables. It's to hide my sex toys. I remember the day you adopted me. I never told them they gave me all the love that shaped me as a person. Surely they had their reasons, which I will never question, for never saying it during their lives. They passed away several years ago, and I will miss them every single day of my life. Sometimes parents don't need you to know any secrets. because there's a good chance they already know or have deduced it long before you even considered telling them. They love you unconditionally. It is your sole decision to share something with them or not. I burned the house down, and not the Christmas tree. I left the lights on without putting water. I was playing with a dog, and we knocked over something. A spark was created, and then the fire was created on Christmas Eve. I told my parents it just sparked and started. My parents got a divorce soon after that. Not sure if I caused that too, but life has been pretty cruddy since that point. I had my mom buy me a BMX. Not because I wanted to play a BMX game, but because you could unlock actual corn from it. The game was also pretty lit, though. I found the Polaroids, including the ones in Robin Hood and the Maid Moreni outfits. I have no clue what those are, and something tells me I don't want to know. I made out with one of my mom's friends. Looking back on it, I regret it, and I'm not proud of it. She was super hot, but I'm glad it just stayed as making out multiple times over the course of the summer, and nothing more. We almost had naughty fun time, but fortunately I did not have rubbers, and so I turned her down. Ultimately, it turns out she was fucking crazy. In my experience, at least. She always seemed normal to everyone else, though. My grandmother on my father's side gave me $5,000 and made me promise not to tell either parent. I never did. Oh. If only I experienced that. Oh my god. That I tried to off myself when I was 14. My dad and I had a huge fight, and I was about to hang myself. Right before I went through with it, he called me and asked me to come downstairs, and that he was sorry. We made up. Had he not called me, I probably wouldn't be here now. This was years ago, and I'm doing much better now. I wouldn't dream of doing that now. That time I accidentally kept taking sleeping pills wasn't actually an accident. I was trying to off myself because I was unhappy. I told them I got drunk after taking two and was in this weird state I couldn't sleep, but couldn't remember taking the previous pills, so I kept taking more. In reality, I took them all at once. I got a tube of charcoal flushed down my throat for that one. Years later, the neck injury I said was because of a lanyard that ripped off my neck. It was actually a failed attempt to hang myself. The knot fell apart after I lost consciousness, and I woke up on the floor with a rug burn where the rope was. My address, lol. Yeah, there's plenty of parents who you wouldn't tell that to, because they're absolute lunatics. Respect. I had a huge problem with alcohol. They might have been suspecting it, but I was always able to control it, just when I needed to, so they didn't catch on. One night, we were in a club and I drank way too much, more than I ever did. So at like 4 a.m., everyone had gone home except some dudes smoking outside. I went up to them and asked which way is home. Long story short, I ended up taking a pill with them, which to this day I have no idea what it was. I completely lost track of everything. Next thing I knew, they were also gone, and I had no idea where I was. I freaked out. I was already pretty much at my drunk mind, but the hours before were missing. It was dark, and I was in another town, as I didn't recognize anything around me. I've dealt with depression before, but right then and there, it hit me so hard I couldn't believe what I was feeling. So I just went on some long road until I saw a truck coming my way. Then I found myself standing in front of it, waiting for it to hit me head on. The truck stopped, the guy saw me all along, and had just enough time to stop. What I'm sure about to happen is that I wasn't counting for that to happen, but I just accepted it. That is very much me in many situations, which are never this drastic, of course. I'm convinced it meant if I walked up to this dude and asked him for directions. Luckily, while lurking around, I was actually making my way back to town. I still had to walk 2 hours home, but getting in bed that night was the best feeling I've ever felt. So yeah, I'm not ever telling them that one. When I was younger, maybe 11, I had been eating bagels for a week straight. They were so freaking good. Cream cheese slathered all over. And one day my dad said, no more bagels for a few days. I said, okay. But when he went upstairs, I had a bagel. He will never know. When I was 10, I went on our old sailboat with my parents and sister for the weekend. When we got back, I ran ahead to the car while my parents unloaded it at the dock. I fancied myself a locksmith, I guess, and decided to pick the lock on the trunk of our 1980s Caprice Classic with a stick. I decided to unlock the trunk of the car with a stick. Well, needless to say, it didn't work, and I also broke a stick off in the lock. So my parents get to the car, and for some reason, the key doesn't work, and we have a giant pile of bags and large coolers. My dad proceeds to fiddle with the key and lock, tries to pry the trunk open, and curses for what seems like hours. It's getting dark. Dad is still cursing. He finally manages to pry the rear of the back seat forward, and there is a tiny gap in the trunk. I'm convinced to crawl through it into a pitch black trunk and try to open it. I get in somehow. Eventually, I brace myself on my hands and knees, arch my back, and push hard as I can, and the trunk pops open. We load up the trunk, tie it down with a bungee cord, and drive the 2 hours home. Dad is still cursing, and I will never tell him. When I was a teen, I once stole a cucumber from the crisper to use as a dildo. I threw it out the window when my parents came home early. My mom was so confused that the cucumber was missing, which made me feel pretty guilty. Then, a while later, she was equally confused as to why there were cucumbers growing out in her garden. She served those magical cucumbers to so many people. Family meals, church potlucks, and so on. 4 years ago, I put a loaded pistol in my mouth. I was going to end it all, and my dad doesn't know he saved my life that day. My son died earlier this year, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. We had no notion that he was suicidal, and we still have no idea as to why of it all. I'm trying to make peace with the idea of that. I'll never know. One of the hardest parts right now is thinking about my boy going through that much pain and doing it alone. I have spurts of angers that after everything he didn't trust that I could handle it, or sadness that he didn't trust that I could help with anything. I would give anything to be able to figure out a way to make him comfortable enough just to talk to me about his pain. So please, as a father, I would encourage you to talk to your parents about mental health in general. Give them the chance to just be there with you through these dark times. You're loved so fucking deeply, and it costs nothing to just have a conversation. Please. For context, the narrator's not the father. I'm just reading a comment below that, cause it has a message that many of you watching this might be able to get something from. On to the next story. It was me that peed in the trash can next to the toilet and not the dog. I was 6. They still tell this story to this day because the dog was infamous for doing crazy stuff. The extensive self-harm scars on my torso, and the new tattoo I got over them after being 2 years clean. My brother R-worded my sister. I beat the shit out of him and drove him to the police station. Oh, sorry, hiccup. Drove him to the police station. I would never tell them that cocaine is a hell of a drug. I quit a long time ago, but I would never want them to find that out for years. All I would do at night is drink and snort blow. That's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed, remember to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and all that good stuff. Check out my Reddit story playlist. Get that watch time up. I will see you all next time. Hasta la pasta.